My green shoes on here, as you can see. Hence, I am ready to go. We are going to talk about one of the greatest rivalries in all of tennis. Chris Evert versus Martina Navratilova. And this rivalry takes place with the Cold War going on in the background. Or maybe this rivalry is in the background of the Cold War, would be a better way to put it. So this rivalry takes place between 1973 and 1988. Let's start this off by looking at the competition between the two. I'm going to use the Wikipedia compilation for us to take a look at these matches. You can see they first played in 1973. And what I want you to look at here is a couple things. First is this column here for the round that they met in. So F being the finals of whatever tournament is listed here, and then also the winner. And then you can scroll, well, I'll scroll down and you can see sort of the dates here. So they start in 1973. You can see they meet in the first round of a tournament back then, and it only takes about a year until they actually meet in the finals of a tournament. And then as we scroll down here and we get into the mid-70s or so, you can start to see that in this column we start to see a lot of Fs, right, for finals. Also, if we look at this column here, you see a lot of Evert, right? So Chris Evert's winning a lot of these matches in the early 70s to mid-70s versus Navratilova. Now Navratilova is getting better, clearly, because they're starting to meet in the finals, meaning even though Martina is not beating Chris, she's making it all the way to the finals of these tournaments. So we scroll down here, we're getting into the late 70s, early 80s, and you see all of these finals, a few semifinals here, and you start to see Navratilova show up pretty evenly, right, in this winners column. As we continue to scroll down and we get to the mid-80s, you notice lots of Navratilovas here, right? So Evert is turned pro before Martina. And so Evert was already one of the top players in the world when Martina turned pro in her teen years, late teens. So Evert had a little bit of a jump on her in her career, and you could see Martina is starting to kind of mature as a player. Evert, of course, is getting a little bit older, but notice this column. All of these are finals, right? And this should indicate to you that one of the big contributors to this rivalry is their dominance, meaning Chris and Martina, over everybody else in the field. You know, in order to make the finals, they have to come up on separate sides of the bracket, right? And we can probably infer from this that they're number one and number two in the world during all of these years. So let's take a look at where this streak starts. So this is 1981 when this meeting in the finals, I mean, they had met in the finals before, but this particular stretch here between 1981 and 1987. So this is a 6-year span in women's professional tennis, and look at how many times these two meet in the finals, right? And with Martina winning most of them, but you can see Evert wins a few in here. And then even toward the end of Everett's career, you can see she still is beating Martina here and there in a few spots, right? So she kind of has a little bit of a resurgence here in the rivalry toward the end. So from this chart, hopefully you can realize a couple things. First of all, these two women were extremely good in this sport, and there was a big gap between the two of them and everyone else in the women's tennis field at that time. Also, we can kind of deduce some of the on-court narrative here from scrolling down. We could see that Evert pretty dominant early on, Martina dominates the middle of this rivalry, and then the end is we have a lot of parity here toward the end, meaning they kind of go back and forth in terms of who wins. The other thing to notice here at the bottom is they met 80 times 80 times. I mean, that is just incredible when you think about tennis and how tennis tournaments work. You know, that it's not just, it's not like the Bengals and Steelers playing 80 times, you know, where they're scheduled in league play. I mean, in order for these two great players to meet, again, they have to make it through everybody else in the field, or they have to be matched up, you know, in a way that they meet each other, you know, as they progress through the tournament. So pretty amazing that they could meet each other 80 times. And if you recall, it started in 1973 to 1988, so we have about a, what's that, 15-year span or so, 16-year span. All right, so that is the on-court, a quick summary of the on-court drama between these two, of which there was a lot. Off the court, you have perhaps even more drama going on. Well, actually, before we get to that, let me mention one other thing about the on-court, or two other things. So, depending on how much of a tennis fan you are, how much you know about tennis, there's different styles of play, right? One is kind of a baseline style of play. The other is like a serve and volley, meaning you serve and then you go to the net. There was a contrast in their styles of play. Chris Evert was much more of a baseline player, you know, liked to stay back, hit hard returns, whereas Martina was much more of a serve and volley type player. Also, their styles or their attitudes on the court were quite a bit different. Chris Evert was kind of cool and collected on the court, didn't let her emotions show that much. She was, whereas Martina was very emotional on the court and kind of cold, cool off the court. Chris Evert was sort of like a sweetheart off the court, meaning like a media darling. Like the media just loved her in the United States. And so they had sort of those contrasting personalities, both on and off the court, and then their contrasting styles of play as well on the court, made for a good media narrative, again, around this rivalry, a good versus evil sort of. And that good versus evil, that's where the Cold War comes in, and this off-the-court drama. So keeping in mind that the Cold War is going on at this point, and Martina was from a Cold War country, Czechoslovakia, and despite the fact that she defected to the United States when she was only, I believe she was 18 years old, if I remember correctly from the chapter. She was 18 years old when she defected to the U.S. So think about that, taking a huge risk. She's at the airport. She doesn't know if she is ever going to see her parents again. She had not told her parents that she was going to defect because she didn't want to take the risk of the authorities not letting her out of the country. So she's hugging them goodbye to get on a plane to go to a tennis tournament in the U.S., knowing that she might not ever be able to come back to her homeland, Czechoslovakia. But for her, it was worth the risk to change the political and social system that she was in. She wanted to be an American. And so she takes this huge risk, but still the media doesn't really recognize her for that risk that she took. Instead, the narrative continues to be, you know, Chris Evert is American, she's our sweetheart here in the U.S., she's a fantastic tennis player, and Martina Navratilova, oh, she's, you know, from a Soviet bloc country, a communist country. She's kind of cold in interviews and things, but remember, this is, you know, she's doing these interviews in English. It's not even her native language, right? She's very young at the time. And so she kind of gets played as the villain within this rivalry. And also she's, initially she doesn't come out, but eventually she comes out as being homosexual. That also, you know, again, at that time, casts her as sort of the outcast within this media narrative. And so for all of those reasons, it ends up being cast as like a good guy, bad guy, or good woman, bad woman narrative in the media. even though the facts and the details, when you really think about it and get into it, are quite a bit different. I did not assign the full 30 for 30, but I think just put the trailer up online for it. But there is a 30 for 30 about the rivalry between these two called Unmatched. If you'd like to get some more information or learn more about the rivalry, you can check out that documentary. It's very, very interesting about how their relationship evolved through the rivalry and then after retirement. Very interesting. Somewhat similar to Bird and Magic, actually. We can make an analogy there as to how much respect they had for each other and how they became friends late in their career. Actually, they played as doubles partners for a little while in their career. That's another thing to note from the chapter, is they were very successful double partners. But this is back when Chris was still beating Martina. Martina takes on a new coach, Nancy Lieberman-Klein, who in herself was a fantastic female athlete in the sport of basketball. So Nancy Lieberman-Klein becomes Martina's coach and says, look, if you really want to beat Chris Evert, you can't be her friend. You can't be her doubles partner. And so the relationship goes cold between the two in the early 80s. And sure enough, Martina does start beating Chris, as we saw in the table there of their results. But then later on, they sort of reunite, and now they're pretty close friends. So that's the Cold War defection. Martina, again, takes lots of discrimination, both for her origins being from a Soviet bloc country or a communist country, and also for her sexual orientation as well. She's discriminated against. Again, they have these personality contrasts. So if we make a list here of why these two are rivals, I think we should definitely start the list with their parity on the court and also their relative dominance over everyone else. So that's sort of the on the court part of it, right? That's certainly contributing to this rivalry. Certainly they have lots of cultural difference, which was played up in the media, both in terms of their actual background culture, but also in terms of kind of their personalities and their style of play were different. You know, I realize that's not necessarily a cultural thing, but those differences were played up, as I said, a lot in the media narrative. You also, in this case, is a great example of frequency of play. Again, 80 times they played each other. I can't remember what the all-time record was. I think it was very, very close, like 42-38, I want to say. Navratilova had won 42 and Chris Evert had won 38 or something about that. So lots of parity, certainly frequency of play here. When you play that many times in the finals, you are most certainly going to have defining moments. Of course, these two are huge superstars, so we have star power as well within this rivalry. And all of these factors sort of go together to create a media narrative that made this rivalry almost larger than life. So make sure that you, if you haven't already, check out the chapter, because there's lots of details in there about this rivalry in our Rivals book. And we will conclude with this quick video that kind of gives us a short summary of the rivalry.
One of the greatest rivalries in tennis history is that of Chris Evert and Martina Navratilova. They played each other 80 times, a head-to-head record that may never be beaten.
Oh, there you see. 43-37.
Fantastic.
Together, they defined women's tennis, and their rivalry helped the sport achieve the popularity that it has today.
To be the greatest rivalry I think that ever was on an individual sport, if you compare it to Federer and Nadal, they played I think 22 times or something like that. They played 80 times.
The rivalry, people wanted to see it, and it was almost guaranteed on the tournament trail that they would play in the finals.
While we were most of the time number one, number two in the world, and to get from that, I have one of my closest friends, be Chris Evert. We've stayed in each other's lives and always will be, always will have that connection. So it's really nice to be a part of it. I'm honored.
They developed a wonderful friendship, but it didn't show on the court. They were two vicious tennis players.
We made each other better. She made me become more of an all-court player and become a better athlete, and I think I helped her develop better ground strokes, and we pushed each other, and it was a great rivalry because we brought our own set of fans with us, and I think it created more excitement for tennis. I think it helped women's tennis.
Rivalries will always be an integral part of what makes women's tennis exciting for fans.
All right, that's it for this rivalry. See you next time.